The human body at orientation, function preview, anatomy and physiology are complementary sciences that allow one to study, classify, and understand body structures and functions. Goals: define anatomy and physiology. Explain how anatomy and physiology are related. Most of us are naturally curious about our bodies. We want to know what makes us tick. Infants can keep themselves happy for a long time staring at their own hands or pulling at their mother's nose. Older children wonder where food goes when they swallow it, and some believe that they will grow a watermelon in their belly if they swallow the seed. They scream loudly when approached by a medical professional, fearing shots that sting, but they like to play doctor. Adults become upset when their hearts pound, when they have uncontrollable hot flashes, and when they cannot keep their weight down. Anatomy and physiology, subdivisions of biology, explore many of these topics as they describe how our bodies are put together and how they work. Anatomy. Anatomy is the study of structure and shape of the body and its parts and their relationship to one another. Whenever we look at our own body or study large body structures such as the heart or bones, we are observing gross anatomy, that is, studying large, easily observable structures. Indeed, the term anatomy, derived from the Greek words meaning to cut, tomi, apart, ana, is related most closely to gross anatomical studies because in such studies preserved animals or their organs are dissected, or cut up, to be examined. Microscopic anatomy, in contrast, is the study of body structures that are too small to be seen with the naked eye. The cells and tissues of the body can only be seen through a microscope. Physiology. Physiology is the study of how the body and its parts work or function. Physio equals nature. Ology is the study of. Like anatomy, physiology has many subdivisions. For example, neurophysiology explains the workings of the nervous system, and cardiac physiology studies the function of the heart, which acts as a muscular pump to keep blood flowing throughout the body. Relationships between anatomy and physiology. Anatomy and physiology are always related. The parts of your body form a well-organized unit, and each of those parts has a job to do to make the body operate as a whole. Structure determines what functions can take place. For example, the lungs are not muscular chambers like the heart and cannot pump blood through the body. But because the walls of their air sacs are very thin, they can exchange gases and provide oxygen to the body. We stress the intimate relationship between anatomy and physiology through this text to make your learning meaningful. Did you get it? Why would you have a hard time learning and understanding physiology if you did not also understand anatomy? Question number 2. Kidney function, bone growth, and beating of the heart are all topics of anatomy, true or false? Levels of structural organization. Goals 1-3. Name the six levels of structural organization that make up the human body and explain how they are related. Goal 1-4. Name the organ systems of the body and briefly state the major functions of each system. Goal 1-5. Identify and classify by organ system all organs discussed. Heading: From atoms to organisms. The human body exhibits many levels of structural complexity. The simplest level of structural ladder is the chemical level, covered in Chapter 2. At this level, atoms, tiny building blocks of matter, combine to form molecules such as water, sugar, and proteins. Molecules, in turn, associate in specific ways to form microscopic cells, the smallest unit of all living things. All cells have some common function, but individual cells vary widely in size and shape, reflecting their particular functions in the body. The simplest living creatures are composed of single cells, but in complex organisms such as trees or human beings, the structural ladder continues on to the tissue level. Tissues consist of similar cells that have a common function. Each of the four basic tissue types, epithelial, connective, muscular, and neural, plays a definite but different role in the body. An organ is a structure composed of two or more tissue types that perform a specific function for the body. At the organ level of organization, extremely complex functions become possible. For example, the small intestine, which digests and absorbs food, is composed of all four tissue types. An organ system, is a group of organs that work together to accomplish a common purpose. For example, the heart and blood vessels of the cardiovascular system circulate blood continuously to carry nutrients and oxygen to all body cells. In all, 11 organ systems make up the living human being, or the organisms, which represents the highest level of structural organization, the organismal level. The organismal level is the sum total of all structural levels working together to keep us alive. Heading: Organ System Overview. Integumentary System. The integumentary system is the external covering of the body, or the skin. It waterproofs the body and cushions and protects the deeper tissues from injury. It also secretes salts and urea in perspiration and helps regulate body temperature. Temperature, pressure, and pain receptors located in the body alert us to what is happening at the body surface. Heading: Skeletal System. The skeletal system consists of bones, cartilages, ligaments, and joints. It supports the body and provides a framework that the skeletal muscles use to cause movement. It also has a protective function. For example, the skull encloses and protects the brain. Hematopoiesis, or formation of blood cells, takes place within the cavities of the skeleton. The hard substance of the bone acts as a storehouse for minerals. Heading: Muscular System. The muscles of the body have only one function: to contract or shorten. When this happens, movement occurs. Hence, muscles can be viewed as machines of the body. The mobility of the body as a whole reflects the activity of the skeletal muscles, the large, fleshy muscles attached to the bones. When these contract, you are able to stand erect, walk, leap, grasp, throw a ball, or smile. The skeletal muscles form the muscular system. These muscles are distinct from muscles of the heart and other hollow organs which move fluid or other substances along the definite pathways within the body. Heading: Nervous System. The nervous system is the body's fast-acting control system. It consists of the brain, spinal cord, nerves, and sensory receptors. The body must be able to respond to irritants or stimuli coming from outside the body, such as light, sound, or changes in temperature, and from inside the body, such as decreases in oxygen or stretching of the tissue. The sensory receptors detect these changes and send messages via electrical signals called nerve impulses to the central nervous system, so that it is constantly informed about what is going on. The central nervous system then assesses this information and responds by activating the appropriate body effectors, muscles, or glands. Heading: Endocrine System. Like the nervous system, the endocrine system controls body activities, but it acts much more slowly. The endocrine glands produce chemical molecules called hormones and release them into the blood to travel to relatively distant target organs. The endocrine glands include the pituitary, thyroid, parathyroids, adrenals, thymus, pancreas, pineal, ovaries, and testes. The endocrine glands are not connected anatomically in the same way that parts of the other organs are. What they have in common is that they'll all secrete hormones which regulate other structures. The body functions controlled by hormones are many and varied, involving every cell in the body. Growth, reproduction, and food use by cells are all controlled, at least in part, by hormones. Heading: Cardiovascular System. The primary organs of the cardiovascular system are the heart and blood vessels. Using blood as a transporting fluid, the cardiovascular system carries oxygen, nutrients, hormones, and other substances to and from the tissue cells, where exchanges are made. White blood cells and chemicals in the blood help to protect the body from such foreign invaders as bacteria, toxins, and tumor cells. The heart acts as the blood pump, propelling blood out of its chambers into the blood vessels to be transported to all body tissues. Heading: Lymphatic System. The role of the lymphatic system complements that of the cardiovascular system. Its organs include lymphatic vessels, lymph nodes, and other lymphoid organs such as spleen and tonsils. The lymphatic vessels return fluid leaked from the blood back to the blood vessels so that the blood can keep continuously circulating through the body. The lymph nodes and other lymphoid organs help to cleanse the body and house cells involved in immunity. Heading: Respiratory. The job of the respiratory system is to keep the body constantly supplied with oxygen and to remove carbon dioxide. The respiratory system consists of the nasal passages, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, and lungs. Within the lungs are tiny air sacs. Gases are transported to and from the blood through the thin walls of these air sacs. Heading: Digestive System. The digestive system is basically a tube running through the body from the mouth to anus. The organs of the digestive system include the oral cavity, the mouth, esophagus, stomach, small and large intestines, and rectum, plus a number of accessory organs, liver, salivary glands, pancreas, and others. Their role is to break down food and deliver the products to the blood for dispersal to the body cells. The undigested food that remains in the tract leaves the body through the anus as feces. The breakdown activities that begin in the mouth are completed in the small intestines. From that point on, the major function of the digestive system is to reclaim water. The liver is considered a digestive organ because of the bile it produces to break down fats. The pancreas, which delivers digestive enzymes to the small intestines, also is functionally a digestive organ. Heading: Urinary System. The body produces waste as byproducts of its normal functions, and these wastes must be disposed of. One type of waste contains nitrogen. Examples are urea and uric acid, which results when the body cells break down proteins and nucleic acid. The urinary system removes the nitrogen-containing wastes from the blood and flushes them from the body in urine. This system, often called the excretory system, is composed of the kidneys, ureters, bladder, and urethra. Other important functions of the system include maintaining the body's water and salt electrolyte balance and regulating the acid-base balance of the blood. Heading: Reproductive System. The reproductive system exists primarily to produce offspring. The testes of the male produce sperm. Other male reproductive system structures are the scrotum, penis, accessory glands, and the duct system, which carries sperm to outside of the body. The ovaries of the females produce eggs or ova. The female duct system consists of uterine tubes, uterus, and vagina. The uterus provides the site for the development of the fetus, immature infant, once fertilization has occurred. Did you get it? Question number 3. At which level of structural organization is the stomach? At which level is a glucose molecule? Question number 4. Which organ system includes the trachea, lungs, nasal cavity, and bronchi? Heading: Maintaining Life. Goal 1.6. List 8 functions that humans must perform to maintain life. Goal 1.7. List the 5 survival needs of the human body. Heading: Necessary life functions. Now that we have introduced the structural levels composing the human body, a question naturally follows. What does this highly organized human body do? Like all complex animals, human beings maintain their boundaries, move, respond to environmental changes, take in and digest nutrients, carry out metabolism, dispose of waste, reproduce themselves, and grow. We will discuss each of these necessary life functions briefly here and in more detail in later chapters. Organ systems do not work in isolation. Instead, they work together to promote the well-being of the entire body. Because this theme is emphasized throughout this text, it is worthwhile to identify the most important organ systems contributing to each of the necessary life functions. Also, if you study this figure, you may want to refer back to the more detailed description of the organ system just provided, page 3 to 7 and in figure 1-2. Heading: Maintaining boundaries. Every living organism must be able to maintain its boundaries so that its insides remains distinct from its outside. Every cell of the human body is surrounded by an external membrane that contains its contents and allows needed substances in while generally preventing entry of potentially damaging or unnecessary substances. The body as a whole is also enclosed by the integumentary system or skin. The integumentary system protects internal organs from drying out, which would be fatal, from bacteria, and from damaging effects of heat, sunlight, and an unbelievable number of chemical substances in the external environment. Heading: Movement. Movement includes all activities promoted by the muscular system, such as propelling ourselves from one place to another and manipulating the external environment with our fingers. The skeletal system provides the bones that the muscle pulls on as they work. Movement also occurs when the substances such as blood, foodstuffs, and urine are propelled through the internal organs of the cardiovascular, digestive, and urinary systems, respectively. Heading: Responsiveness. Responsiveness, or irritability, is the ability to sense changes or stimuli in the environment and then react to them. For example, if you cut your hand on broken glass, you involuntarily pull your hand away from the painful stimulus, the broken glass. You do not need to think about it. It just happens. Likewise, when the amount of carbon dioxide in your blood rises to dangerously high levels, your breathing rate speeds up to blow off the excess carbon dioxide. Because nerve cells are highly irritable and can communicate rapidly with each other via electrical impulses, the nervous system bears the major responsibility for responsiveness. However, all body cells are irritable to some extent. Digestion. Heading: Digestion. Digestion is the process of breaking down ingested food into simple molecules that can then be absorbed into the blood. The nutrient-rich blood is then distributed to all body cells by the cardiovascular system. In a simple one-celled organism such as an amoeba, the cell itself is the digestion factory. But in the complex multicellular human body, the digestive system performs this function for the entire body. Heading: Metabolism. Metabolism is a broad term that refers to all chemical reactions that occur within body cells. It includes breaking down complex substances into simpler building blocks, making larger structures from smaller ones, and using nutrients and oxygen to produce molecules of adenosine triphosphate, ATP, the energy-rich molecules that power cellular activities. Metabolism depends on digestive and respiratory systems to make nutrients and oxygens available to the blood and on the cardiovascular system to distribute these needed substances throughout the body. Metabolism is regulated chiefly by hormones secreted by the glands of the endocrine system. Excretion. Excretion is the process of removing excreta, or waste from the body. If the body is to continue to operate as we expect it to, it must get rid of the non-useful substances produced during digestion and metabolism. Several organ systems participate in excretion. For example, the digestive system rids the body of indigestible food residue in feces, and the urinary system disposes of nitrogen-containing metabolic wastes in urine. Heading: Reproduction. Reproduction, the production of offspring, can occur on a cellular or organismal level. In cellular reproduction, the original cell divides, producing two identical daughter cells that may then be used for body growth or repair. Reproduction of the human organism, or making a whole new person, is the task of the organs of the reproductive system, which produce sperm and eggs. When a sperm unites with an egg, a fertilized egg forms, which then develops into a baby within the mother's body. The function of the reproductive system is regulated very precisely by hormones of the endocrine system. Growth. Heading: Growth is an increase in size, usually accomplished by an increase in the number of cells. For growth to occur, cell-constructing activities must occur at a faster rate than cell-destroying ones. Hormones released by the endocrine system play a major role in directing growth. New heading: Survival needs. The goal of all body systems is to maintain life. However, life is extraordinarily fragile and requires that several factors be available. These factors, which we will call survival needs, includes nutrients, oxygen, water, and appropriate temperature and atmospheric pressure. Nutrients, which the body takes in through food, contain the chemicals used for energy and cell building. Carbohydrates are major energy-providing fuel for body cells. Proteins, and to a lesser extent, fats are essential for building cell structures. Fats also cushion body organs and provide reserve fuel. Minerals and vitamins are required for the chemical reaction that go on in cells and for oxygen transport in the blood. All the nutrients in the world are useless unless oxygen is available. Because the chemical reactions that release energy from food require oxygen, human cell can survive only a few minutes without it. Approximately 20% of the air we breathe is oxygen. It is made available to the body and blood and body cells by the cooperative efforts of the respiratory and cardiovascular system. Water accounts for 60 to 80% of the body weight. It is the single most abundant chemical in the body and provides a fluid base for body secretion and excretions. We obtain water chiefly from ingested foods or liquids, and we lose it by evaporation from the lungs and skin and in body excretions. If chemical reactions are to continue at life-sustaining levels, normal body temperature must be maintained. As body temperature drops below 37 degrees Celsius or 98 degrees Fahrenheit, metabolic reactions become slower and slower and finally stop. When body temperature is too high, chemical reactions proceed too rapidly and body proteins begin to break down. At either extreme, death occurs. Most body heat is generated by activity by the skeletal muscles. The force exerted on the surface of the body by the weight of air is also referred to as atmospheric pressure. Breathing and the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide depend on appropriate atmospheric pressure. At high altitudes, where the air is thin and atmospheric pressure is lower, gas exchange may be too slow to support cellular metabolism. The mere presence of these survival factors is not sufficient to maintain life. They must be present in appropriate amounts as well. Excesses and deficits may be equally harmful. For example, the food ingested must be of high quality and in proper amounts. Otherwise, nutritional disease, obesity, or starvation is likely. Did you get it? Question number 5. In addition to being able to metabolize, grow, digest food, and excrete waste, what other functions must the organism perform if it is to survive? Question number 6. Oxygen is a survival need. Why is it so important? Heading: Homeostasis. Goals 1-8. Define homeostasis and explain its importance. Goal 1.9. Define negative feedback and describe its role in maintaining homeostasis and normal body function. When you really think about the fact that your body contains trillions of cells in nearly constant activity, and that remarkably little usually goes wrong with it, you begin to appreciate what a marvelous machine your body really is. The word homeostasis describes the body's ability to maintain relatively stable internal conditions, even though the outside world is continuously changing. Although the literal translation of homeostasis is unchanging, means the same and stasis means standing still, the term does not really mean an unchanging state. Instead, it indicates a dynamic state of equilibrium or a balance in which internal conditions change and vary, but always within relatively narrow limits. In general, the body demonstrates homeostasis when its needs are being adequately met and it is functioning smoothly. Virtually every organ system plays a role in maintaining the constancy of the internal environment. Adequate blood levels of vital nutrients must be continuously present, and heart activity and blood pressure must be constantly monitored and adjusted so that the blood is propelled with adequate force to reach all body tissues. Additionally, waste must not be allowed to accumulate, and the body temperature must be precisely controlled. Heading: Homeostatic Controls. Communication within the body is essential for homeostasis and is accomplished chiefly by the nervous and endocrine system, which use electrical signals delivered by nerves or blood-borne hormones, respectively, as information carriers. The details of how these two regulating systems operate are the subject of later chapters, but we explain the basic characteristics of the neural and hormonal control systems that promote homeostasis here. Regardless of the factor or event being regulated, this is called the variable, all homeostatic control mechanisms have at least three components. The first component is a receptor. Essentially, it is some type of sensor that monitors and responds to change in the environment. It responds to such changes, called stimuli, by sending information input to the second element, the control center. Information flows from the receptor to the control center along an afferent pathway. It may help to remember that information traveling along the afferent pathway approaches the control center. So afferent pathway approaches. The control center, which determines the level, set point, at which a variable is to be maintained, analyzes the information it receives, and then determines the appropriate response or course of action. The third component is the effector, which provides the means for the control center's response to the stimuli. Information flows from the control center to the effector along the efferent pathway. Efferent information exits the control center. So that again is efferent, E-F-F-E-R-E-N-T, information exits the control center. The results of this response then feed back to the influence the stimuli, to the stimulus, either by depressing it so that the whole control mechanism is shut off, or enhancing it so that reaction continues at an even faster rate. Most homeostatic control mechanisms are negative feedback mechanisms. In such systems, the net effect of the response to the stimulus is to shut off the original stimulus or reduce its intensity. A good example of a non-biological negative feedback system is a home heating system connected to a thermostat. In this situation, the thermostat contains both the receptor and the control center. If the thermostat is set at 20 degrees Celsius or 68 Fahrenheit, the heating system, the effector, will be triggered on when the house temperature drops below the setting. As a furnace produces heat, the air is warmed. When the temperature reaches 20 degrees Celsius or slightly higher, the thermostat sends a signal to shut off the furnace. Your body thermostat, located in the part of your brain called the hypothalamus, operates in a similar way to regulate body temperature. Other negative feedback mechanisms regulate heart rate, blood pressure, breathing rate, blood levels of glucose, oxygen, carbon dioxide, and minerals. Positive feedback mechanisms are rare in the body because they tend to increase the original disturbance and to push the variable farther from its original value. Typically, these mechanisms control infrequent events that occur explosively and do not require continuous adjustments. Blood clotting and the birth of a baby are the most familiar examples of positive feedback mechanisms. Heading: Homeostatic Imbalance 1.1. Homeostasis is so important that disease can be regarded as a result of its disturbance, a condition called homeostatic imbalance. As we age, our body organs become less efficient and our internal conditions become less and less stable. These events place us at an increasing risk for illness and produce the changes we associate with aging. We provide examples of homeostatic imbalance throughout this text to enhance your understanding of normal physiological mechanisms. These homeostatic imbalances sections are preceded by the symbol to alert you that an abnormal condition is being described. Did you get it? Question number 7. When we say that the body demonstrates homeostasis, do we mean that conditions in the body are unchanging? Explain your answer. Question number 8. When we begin to become dehydrated, we usually get thirsty, which causes us to drink liquids. Is thirst sensation part of the negative or positive feedback control system? Defend your choice. New heading: The Language of Anatomy. Goal 1-10. Verbally describe and demonstrate the anatomical position. Goal 111. Use proper anatomical terminology to describe body directions, surfaces, and body planes. Goal 112. Locate the major body cavities and list the chief organs in each cavity. Learning about the body is exciting, but our interest sometimes dwindles when we are faced with the terminology of anatomy and physiology. Let's face it, you can't just pick up an A&P book and read it as though it were a novel. Unfortunately, confusion is inevitable without specialized terminology. For example, if you're looking at a ball, above means the area over the top of the ball. Other directional terms can be used consistently because the ball is sphere. All sides and surface are equal. The human body, of course, has many protrusions and bends. Thus the question becomes, above what? To prevent misunderstanding, anatomists use a set of terms that allow body structures to be located and identified clearly with just a few words. We present and explain this language of anatomy next. Anatomical position. To accurately describe body parts and position, we must have an initial reference point and use directional terms. To avoid confusion, we always assume that the body is in a standard position called an anatomical position. It is important to understand this position because most body terminology used in this text refers to the body positioning regardless of the position of the body happens to be in. In anatomical position, the body is erect with feet parallel and the arms hanging at the sides with the palms facing forward. Directional terms. Directional terms allow medical professionals and anatomists to explain exactly where one body structure is in relation to another. For example, we can describe the relationship between the ears and the nose informally by saying the ears are located on each side of the head to the left and right of the nose. Using anatomical terminology, this condenses the ears are lateral to the nose. Using anatomical terminology saves words and once learned is much clearer. Although most of these terms are also used in everyday conversation, keep in mind their anatomical meanings are very precise. Before continuing, take a minute to check your understanding of what you have read in this table. Give the relationship between the following body parts using the correct anatomical terms. This assumes that we looked over table 1.1, which is on page 15. Skipping. Regional terms. There are many visible landmarks on the surface of the body. Once you know their proper anatomical names, you can be specific in referring to different regions of the body. The section is called Anterior Body Landmarks. It is essentially a list of dictionary or terms which have definitions, which may or may not be useful to read. But look at the figure 1.5 on page 16 to find the following body regions. Once you have identified all the anterior body landmarks, cover the labels and describe what the structures are. Then go through the list again, pointing out areas on your own body. Abdominal, meaning anterior body trunk inferior to the ribs. Acromial, point of shoulder. Antebrachial, forearm. Antecubital, anterior surface of elbow. Axillary, armpit. Brachial, arm. Buccal, cheek area. I'm not quite sure if I said that right. Carpal, wrist. Cervical, neck region. Coxal, coxal. Hip, don't know if I said that right. Crural, leg. Deltoid, curve of shoulder formed by large deltoid muscle. Digital, fingers or toes. Femoral, thigh. Fibular, lateral part of leg. Frontal, forehead. Inguinal, area where thigh meets body trunk, groin. Mental, means chin. Nasal, nose area. Oral, mouth. Orbital, eye area. Patellar, anterior knee. Pelvic, area overlying the pelvis anteriorly. Pubic, genital region. Sternal, breastbone area. Tarsal, ankle region. Thoracic, chest. Umbilical, navel. New heading, posterior body landmarks, page 17. Calcaneal, heel of foot. Cephalic, head. Femoral, thigh. Gluteal, buttocks. Lumbar, area of back between ribs and hips, the loin. Occipital, posterior surface of the head or base of skull. Olecranon, posterior surface of the elbow. Popliteal, posterior knee area. Sacral, area between hips. Scapular, shoulder blade region. Sural, the posterior surface of the leg or the calf. Not quite sure if I said that right. Vertebral, area of spinal column. The plantar region, or the sole of the foot, actually on the inferior body surface, is illustrated along with the posterior body landmarks. Did you get it? Question number 9. What is the anatomical position and why is it important that an anatomy student understand it? Question number 10. The axillary and the acromial areas are both in general area of the shoulder. To what specific body area does each term apply? Heading, body planes and sections. When preparing to look at the internal structures of the body, medical students make a section or cut. When the section is made through the body wall or through an organ, it is made along an imaginary line called a plane. Because the body is three-dimensional, we can refer to three types of plane or sections that lie at right angles to one another. A sagittal section is a cut along the lengthwise or longitudinal plane of the body, dividing the body into right and left parts. If the cut is down the median plane of the body and the right and left parts are equal in size, it is called the median or mid-sagittal section. All other sagittal sections are parasagittal sections, para meaning near. A frontal section is a cut along lengthwise that divides the body into an anterior and posterior parts. It is also called a coronal section. So coronal section is the same as frontal. A transverse section is a cut along a horizontal plane dividing the body into superior and inferior parts. It is also called a cross-section. Sectioning a body or one of its organs along the different planes often results in very different views. For example, a transverse section of the body trunk at the level of the kidneys would show kidney structure in the cross-section very nicely. A frontal section of the body trunk would show a different view of the kidney anatomy, and the mid-sagittal section would miss the kidneys completely. Information on body organ positioning can be gained by taking MRIs along different body planes. Heading: Body cavities. Anatomy A&P textbooks typically describe two sets of internal body cavities called the dorsal and ventral body cavities that provide different degrees of protection to the organs within them. Because these cavities differ in their mode of embryological development and in their lining membranes, many anatomy reference books do not identify the dorsal or neural body cavity as an internal body cavity. However, the idea of two major sets of internal body cavities is a useful learning concept, so we will continue to use it here. Heading: Dorsal body cavity. The dorsal body cavity has two subdivisions, which are continuous with each other. The cranial cavity is in the space inside the bony skull. The brain is well protected because it occupies the cranial cavity. The spinal cavity extends from the cranial cavity nearly to the end of the vertebral column. The spinal cord, which is a continuation of the brain, is protected by the vertebrae which surround the spinal cavity. Heading: Ventral body cavity. The ventral body cavity is much larger than the dorsal cavity. It contains all the structures within the chest and abdomen, that is, the visceral organs in those regions. Like the dorsal cavity, the ventral body cavity is subdivided. The superior thoracic cavity is separated from the rest of the ventral cavity by a dome-shaped muscle, the diaphragm. The organs in the thoracic cavity, lungs, heart, and others, are somewhat protected by the rib cage. A central region called the mediastinum separates the lungs into right and left cavities in the thoracic cavity. The mediastinum itself houses the heart, trachea, and several other visceral organs. The cavity inferior to the diaphragm is the abdominopelvic cavity. Some prefer to subdivide it into a superior abdominal cavity containing the stomach, liver, intestines, and other organs, and an inferior pelvic cavity with the reproductive organs, bladder, and rectum. However, there is no actual physical structure dividing the abdominopelvic cavity. The pelvic cavity is not continuous with the abdominal cavity in a straight plane, but rather tips away from the abdominal cavity in the posterior direction. Homeostatic imbalance. When the body is subjected to physical trauma, as often happens in an automobile accident, the most vulnerable abdominal pelvic organs are those within the abdominal cavity. The reason is that the abdominal cavity walls are formed only of trunk muscles and are not reinforced by bone. The pelvic organs receive somewhat of a greater degree of protection from the bony pelvis in which they reside. Because the abdominopelvic cavity is quite large and contains many organs, it helps divide it up into smaller areas for study. A scheme commonly used by medical personnel divides the abdominopelvic cavity into four more or less equal regions called quadrants. Having a hard time at this abdominopelvic word. A scheme commonly used by medical divides the abdominopelvic cavity into four or more or less equal regions called quadrants. The quadrants are then simply named according to their relative positions, that is, right upper quadrant, right lower quadrant, left upper quadrant, and left lower quadrants. Another system, used mainly by anatomists, divides the abdominopelvic cavity into 9 separate regions by 4 planes. Although the names of the 9 regions are unfamiliar to you now, with a little patience and study they will become easier to remember. As you locate these regions in the figure, notice the organs they contain. The umbilical region is the centermost region, deep to and surrounding the umbilical, which is the navel. The epigastric region is superior to the umbilical region. Epi means upon or above, and gastric means stomach. The hypogastric or pubic region is inferior to the umbilical region. Hypo means below. The right and left iliac or inguinal regions are lateral to the hypogastric region. The right and left lumbar regions lie lateral to the umbilical regions, and the right and left hypochondriac regions flank the epigastric region and contain the lower ribs. This is on page 20, several diagrams on this page. Heading: Other body cavities. In addition to the large closed body cavities, there are several smaller body cavities. Most of these are in the head and open to the body exterior, with the exception of the middle ear cavities. The body regions that house these cavities are shown in figure 1.5. Oral and digestive cavities. The oral cavity, commonly called the mouth, contains the teeth and tongue. This cavity is part of and continuous with the cavity of the digestive organs, which opens to the exterior at the anus. The nasal cavity, located within and posterior to the nose. The nasal cavity is part of the respiratory system's passageways. Orbital cavities. Orbital cavities, orbits, in the skull house the eyes and present them in an anterior position. Middle ear cavities. The middle ear cavities carved into the skull lie medial to the eardrums. These cavities contain tiny bones that transmit sound vibrations to the hearing receptors. Did you get it? Question number 11. If you wanted to separate the thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity of a cadaver, which type of section would you make? Question number 12. Of the spinal cord, small intestines, uterus, and heart, which are in the dorsal body cavity? Question number 13. Joe went to the emergency room where he complained of severe pains in the lower right quadrant of his abdomen. What might his problem be? This is page 21. We are now on the summary at the end of the chapter. An overview of anatomy and physiology, page 122. 1. Anatomy is the study of structure. Observation is used to see the sizes and relationships of the body parts. 2. Physiology is the study of how a structure functions or works. A structure can be referring to a cell, an organ, or organ systems. 3. Structure determines what functions can occur. Therefore, if structure changes, the function must also change. Heading: Levels of structural organization. There are 6 levels of structural organization. Atoms, at the chemical level, combine, forming the unit of life, the cell. Cells are grouped into tissues, which are in turn arranged in specific ways to form organs. An organ system is a group of organs that performs a specific function for the body, which no other organ can do. Together, all the organ systems form the organism or living body. 11 organs make up the human body: the integumentary, skeletal, muscular, nervous, endocrine, cardiovascular, lymphatic, respiratory, digestive, urinary, and reproductive systems. Heading: Maintaining life. To sustain life, an organism must be able to maintain its boundaries, move, respond to stimuli, digest nutrients and excrete wastes, carry on metabolism, reproduce itself, and grow. 2. Survival needs include food, oxygen, water, appropriate temperature, and normal atmospheric pressure. Extremes of any of these factors can be harmful. Heading: Homeostasis. 1. Body functions interact to maintain homeostasis, or relatively stable internal environment within the body. Homeostasis is necessary for survival and good health. Its loss results in illness or disease. 2. All homeostatic control mechanisms have three components. 1. A receptor that responds to environmental changes. 2. A control that assesses those changes and produces a response by activating the effector. Let me repeat that again. Number 2. All homeostatic control mechanisms have three components: a receptor, a control center, and the effector. A receptor that responds to the environmental changes, a control center that assesses those changes and produces a response by activating the third, effector. 3. Most homeostatic control systems are negative feedback systems which act to reduce or stop the initial stimulus. Heading: The language of anatomy. Anatomical terminology is relative and assumes that the body is in an anatomical position, erect, palms facing forward. 2. Directional terms. Superior, above something. These are all medical terms, medical location directional terms. I don't think I should read them. This is on page 22.